Hello! So, we have learnt about, up until now, monopolies, both theoretical monopolies and legal monopolies. And today we're moving on from that, but still very much looking at monopolies and looking at what happens when you have monopoly power. So what can we expect from monopoly markets? And one of the things that we can kind of expect is price discrimination. Now, price discrimination is pretty much exactly what it says on the tin. It's where firms are able to discriminate between consumers based on price. And there are three different types of price discrimination that we're going to go over in the few kind of next coming lessons. First degree, second degree and third degree price discrimination. Now, price discrimination is associated with monopoly markets in the EdExcel kind of specification. But actually, when you move forward, you'll learn that price discrimination is actually not just in that, and we'll have a look at when we look at third degree price discrimination, how actually, because of economies of scale and external economies of scale, actually price discrimination is now available in lots of different market structures. It's not just in monopoly market structures. But today we're going to be looking at first degree price discrimination. So first degree price discrimination, what is it? So first degree price discrimination is also known as perfect price discrimination. You may well see it as perfect price discrimination when you're doing some revision, looking up on a certain website. They are one and the same. So what it is where one firm, or all firms, but mainly a monopoly firm, one firm with a theoretical monopoly, so there's only one in the market, just to kind of make that a bit easier for you, charges every single consumer their maximum price, right? So every single consumer in the market is paying the maximum price that they are willing or able to pay. So our kind of official definition here, so when a firm charges the maximum possible price for every unit consumed. So every single unit, every single consumer pays their maximum price for that product. So thinking about that, what that actually means is that the producer is able to charge every single person, every single quantity, every single unit, their maximum willing price to pay, and therefore there is no consumer surplus. Because when we think about what consumer surplus is the additional welfare from paying under what they're willing, their maximum willing or able to pay, right? So if you go to the shop and you're thinking in your head, I need a new pair of jeans, I'm willing to pay £80, I've got £80 set aside for that new pair of jeans. You get to the shop, you find your pair of jeans, you get to the till. We've all had that moment where we think in our head it's going to cost a certain amount, and we get to the till, they bleep it through, and it's actually £40 instead of £80, maybe it's on sale, and you get that, oh wow, that's more than I was, that's less than I was willing to pay for that. And that's your consumer welfare, that's that physical feeling of kind of satisfaction, of happiness, of you're paying less than you were willing or able to, is consumer welfare. And there isn't any of that in this market, like under first degree price discrimination. There isn't that feeling of kind of, oh, I'm willing to pay less, because you'll charge your maximum price. So what I want you to do is I would like you to have a go and draw this on a diagram. So I'll show you the two diagrams that we're going to use to make that a little bit easier, and then I want you to think about first degree price discrimination and the effect on these two diagrams. Here. These are our two diagrams. This is a very, we're going to go with our monopoly market structure, theoretical monopoly, just to make it a bit easier for you. Don't worry about the legal monopoly for now. And I just want you to think about how price discrimination, specifically first degree price discrimination, well, actually 100% first degree price discrimination, affects these two diagrams, right? So pause the video, have a go at doing that, off you go. Well, when we think about price discrimination, so this is our original diagram where we have a price equilibrium where supply meets demand and a quantity equilibrium, but actually that doesn't really matter, because when we think about it, say for instance, this here is 1 unit, well this 1 unit here is going to be charged this maximum price here, right? Because they're being charged the maximum price. And that's the same for this one, this one, this one, this one. So this one's going to be charged this much because that's their maximum price. And this one's going to be charged this much because that's their maximum price. And that's the same all the way along. So we can see here that as we move towards the equilibrium, actually every single consumer, every single unit that is being produced is being charged their maximum price. So we take that across there. These, for the exact same good, all of these, you know, this price here, this price here, this price here, this price here, and this price here, it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are all being charged simultaneously at the same time for the exact same good. Right? So it's not that the price is falling, actually it's that all of those prices, every single possible price along here for every single quantity is being charged simultaneously all at the exact same time. Right? So if you are willing to pay £100 and I'm willing to pay £70, we're being charged that exactly the same price. So we're both at the same time. So we're both being charged that maximum we're willing or able to pay at the exact same time. So we can start to pick up and really think about, well, what does the producer surplus look like? Well, the producer surplus is literally going to be this entire area, right? So this entire area, every single price is being charged, and therefore the producer has managed to capture the entirety of the consumer surplus, right? So the producer surplus is actually this entire section all the way up, consumer and producer, kind of the traditional consumer and producer surplus is now actually completely the producer surplus. So that is our consumer kind of industry diagram. Now let's take it over and think about what's happening for the firm, right? So normally, traditionally, what we've seen in every single kind of market structure up until now is that the producer will, unless there is another specific reason, profit maximize. Now that means that they're selling at the profit maximizing price to the whole market. Well, that's not what's happening under first degree price discrimination. Obviously, under first degree price discrimination, the firm is actually charging every single individual something, like anything that they're willing or able to pay, the maximum they're willing and able to pay. So for the firm, actually, remember that this is how we measure profit, and we measure profit as the difference between the average revenue and the average cost, you know, as always. So actually for the firm, they're capturing, so normally we'd be like, okay, so you go up here, this is the per unit, and then we times that by the quantity sold, and that's our supernormal profit area. Actually, that's not true under first degree price discrimination, because they're not just charging one price to the entire market. They're charging every single consumer their maximum that they're willing to pay. So actually this entire area, all the way up until our average cost is equal to our average revenue, which we know if this is the entire firm, it is also this point here, if the firm is being allocatively efficient. And then all the way up here is their supernormal profit. They're able to access all of these consumers, and this entire area, you know, this really should hit the same point here. This entire area is our supernormal profit for the firm. So no longer are they kind of going up to here, one per unit, they're making the same amount of supernormal profit. They're not making the same amount of supernormal profit per unit. They're making the maximum amount of supernormal profit for every single unit that they sell, right? So all the way to the point where they're no longer making supernormal profit. So we can see here that the consumer has no surplus here. There's no welfare gained for the consumer, and for the producer, actually they're able to maximising their supernormal profit at every single cost. As long as they're at some point their AC is below their MC, their AC is below their AR, then they're able to make supernormal profit. Right? At some point, up until some point, they will be able to make supernormal profit and stay in the market. So under first degree price discrimination, there's something else that we see or we don't see here that we see when we normally have that theoretical monopoly diagram. You might want to go back and check against that and see what's kind of the difference here. Well, one of the main difference here is that there's no welfare loss. So technically, under first degree price discrimination, there's no welfare lost for the producer or the consumer that we see under a theoretical monopoly. Now, that doesn't mean that that consumers are better off under price discrimination than they are under a theoretical monopoly. You can't really, we think about better off, we usually, welfare, we usually tend to kind of lean back in economics to that idea of Pareto, optimum. I mean, here, and under those, I don't think you can really particularly make a strong argument that this is better than compared to that, because then you're making an argument of, is some consumer welfare better than pushing these out the market? So if they, whatever price the theoretical monopoly sets as its profit maximising price, is that better to have like those people cut out of the market than it is to have no consumer welfare for those that were in the market but could pay more? So there's no welfare loss in this one compared to the theoretical monopoly, but is that, beneficial or not? Who knows? What I would like to think about now is really, is there any examples of this? Can you think of any key examples of first degree price discrimination that happen in kind of, even historically, but have happened in, modern economics, inverted commas? So there are potentially some arguments of a few. We don't really say it's very theoretical. Could you imagine how a firm might go about doing this? Seems to be incredibly impossible, almost, how you can simultaneously know the maximum or willing price, and also then be able to set those prices, and also to stop consumers lying as well. So to kind of stop that, to have perfect information on what the maximum price a consumer is willing to pay, is logistically impossible. But there are some kind of examples that we can potentially link to this. So the first one is one that you will see a lot when you decide to study economics at university, or if you follow through and do a master's or whatever else, is first price sealed bid auctions. So first price sealed bid auctions are where you go to an auction. You probably know about the traditional English auction where people like raise a pallet, but actually there are lots of other types of auctions as well. So there's something that's known as a first price sealed bid auction, where you turn up, you just write the maximum that you're willing to pay, you put it in an envelope, sealed bid, and you put it in, and then the person who's bid the highest wins. That's a first price sealed bid auction. I mean, you could say that links to first degree price discrimination, but even then, I mean, when you look into auctions a little bit more, there is actually like a kind of bidding strategy that means that you don't actually end up bidding your highest amount. So even then, is it an example? There's some grey area there. The second one that some of you may well have come up with is eBay. So is eBay an example of first degree price discrimination, where you put your maximum bid in and then it bids up to that, or there is somewhere you kind of, it's not necessarily like an open auction, but you can just kind of buy it now, or a maximum bid price. Is that an example? Again, it's a grey area. It's probably as close as you're going to get to an example, same as first price sealed bid auction. I mean, these two are technically kind of examples of the same things. It's like an electronic version of a traditional first price sealed bid auction. I very much advise if you want to have a look into this, because it's just one of those topics that's so interesting and just has so much depth, and especially if you kind of want to insight as to how economics, when you look at university, kind of how maths and economics tie together. This is such a good, really fascinating example of kind of research that you can look into and understand on your own. So really, really recommend it. One of the things that you really need to understand about first degree price discrimination moving forward are these two things. So in first degree price discrimination, there is no consumer surplus, there's only producer surplus, because, and the reason why that happens is because all consumers are paying their absolute maximum price. So all consumers are gaining no consumer surplus, right? So every individual consumer has no consumer surplus, and therefore overall there is no consumer surplus, and the producer has managed to capture the entirety of the consumer surplus. And that is essentially first degree price discrimination. So I hope that you've enjoyed this, and next lesson we're going to be looking at second degree price discrimination, and then obviously we'll be looking at third degree price discrimination. Can't wait, and I hope you enjoyed it. Bye!